Kiddos, do you want to keep me company? Do you want to come close and hear a story? First of all, because worship is the work of all the people, or the play of all the people, what makes a Christmas story a Christmas story? How do you know it's a Christmas story? Anyone? There's a baby. There's a star. And not every Christmas story has every one of these things, right? But that's how we feel it's Christmassy. What else? There's love. There are gifts. There might be a change of heart from hate to love, from greed to generosity, from loneliness to community. What else makes a Christmas story a Christmas story? A Christmas tree? Hi, Caroline, is that you up there? Hi. A Christmas tree. What's that? Laughter. Magic. What else? Because it happens at Christmas? Doesn't have to. Because there is hygge. How about people who love those those Hallmark Christmas movies, right? They all have the same plot. What else happens? I've actually never seen one. Maybe I'll get to do it this week. What's that? Snow. Yes. I'm going to tell you all a Christmas story. I didn't make it up. It's from this book called A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. It was written during the Second World War. It was written about what her childhood was like growing up, but it's not an autobiography. She wrote a fictional story, but she grew up in Brooklyn in probably, I don't know when, I forget what year, the teens, 100 years ago. And the main character of the story, Franny, is very poor. She grew up very poor. She did not have much. I meant to tell you, my mother gave me this book when I was 18 years old. And she said, treasure this. And she lived for 18 more years after she gave it to me, and then she died. So this is very precious to me, this book. This is a story about how hard life can be and how we can look for sweetness in it, even when life keeps throwing things at us again and again and again. Anyone feeling like that might be happening right now to you? Yes. It's a story about how hard it can be to be a child, even when your parents love you very much and are trying to do their best. And in it, even though Jesus is not a main character, it's a story really about him, because he also was born into a poor family, born into discomfort and danger, into a life that kept throwing things at him, and parents who did the best they could for him but didn't get it right and couldn't give him everything he needed. So Franny, the main character, is 10 years old. She was small for her age, and she had a brother, Neely, who was 9 years old, and they were best friends, but very different. Franny was quiet, and she loved to read books, and she was very shy and very thoughtful, and Neely was loud and fun and had a lot of friends, and everybody loved him. They were a good pair to each other. And as I said, they're very poor. Their mother did other people's laundry, and she didn't even have a washing machine. She had to do it by hand, which made her hands in the cold Brooklyn winter rough and cracked, and they would bleed and hurt, and still she had to keep doing the laundry. Their father, Johnny, was a singing waiter, which was a lot of fun. He had a beautiful voice, and he would sing songs and bring people their food, but he also had a problem. He drank a lot of beer, and that meant he spent a lot of money on beer, and he didn't want to do it, but his body was allergic to it and just kept drinking more beer, and it made it hard to save money. So here we go. It's Christmas Eve. The spruce trees began coming into the neighborhood the week before Christmas. Their branches were corded to hold back the glory of their spreading and probably to make shipping easier. Vendors rented space on the curb before a store and stretched a rope from pole to pole and leaned the trees against it. All day they walked up and down this one-sided avenue of aromatic leaning trees, blowing on stiff, ungloved fingers and looking with bleak hope at those people who paused. A few ordered a tree set aside for the day. Others stopped to price, inspect, and conjecture, but most came just to touch the boughs surreptitiously, pinch a fingerful of spruce needles together to release the fragrance. And the air was cold and still and full of pine smell and the smell of tangerines, which appeared in the stores only at Christmas time, and the mean street was truly wonderful for a little while. There was a cruel custom in the neighborhood. It was about the trees still unsold when midnight of Christmas Eve approached. There was a saying that if you waited till then, you wouldn't have to buy a tree, they'd chuck 'em at you. And this was literally true. At midnight on the eve of our dear Savior's birth, the kids gathered where there were unsold trees. The man threw each tree in turn, starting with the biggest. Kids volunteered to stand up against the throwing. If a boy didn't fall down under the impact, the tree was his. A little bit sexist there. It doesn't talk about the girls, does it, Amelia? If the boy fell down when the man threw the tree at him, he gave up his chance to win a tree. So you had to pick the right size tree for you. Only the roughest boys and some of the young men elected to be hit by the big trees. The others waited shrewdly until a tree came up that they could stand against. The littlest kids waited. Hey kids, I'm going to ask your help with this story. A.B. and Amelia, come here, I want your help with this story. If you were little and you knew you had to stand up straight when they threw the tree at you, what size tree would you pick to be thrown at you? The smallest tree. So the little kids waited for the tiny little trees like this high, and they shrieked in delight when they won one. Will you shriek in delight? What does it sound like to shriek in delight? I'm sure you did some shrieking yesterday. On the count of 3, we're going to shriek with delight. Y'all, will you help them? 1, 2, 3. Yay! On the Christmas Eve, when Francie was 10 and Neely 9, Mama consented to let them go down and have their first try for a tree. Francie had picked out her tree earlier in the day. She had stood next to it all afternoon and evening, praying no one would buy it. Let's pray that nobody buys the tree. Pray, don't buy that tree. To her joy, it was still there at midnight. She went down there, 10 years old, by herself at midnight. It was, what size do you think it was? A.B. Amelia. Do you think it was tiny? Amelia, what do you think? It was the biggest tree in the neighborhood. And the price was so high that no one could afford to buy it. It was it 6 feet high? Nope. Was it 7 feet high? Nope. Was it 10 feet high? Do you think it was 10 feet high? 10 feet high is pretty tall. It's like 2 of Carmen. Carmen and another Carmen is 10 feet tall. Its branches were bound with new white rope, and it came to a sure point at the top. The man took this tree out first, because you start with the biggest, and before Francie could speak up, a neighborhood bully, a boy of 18 known as Punky Perkins, stepped forward and ordered the man to chuck the tree at him. The man hated the way Punky was so confident, so the man looked around and said, "Anybody else want to take a chance on it?" And Francie stepped forward and said, "Me, mister." A spurt of derisive laughter came from the tree man. Let's hear what derisive laughter sounds like. The kids snickered. Let's hear snickering. and a few adults who'd gathered to watch the fun guffawed. Oh, go on, you're too little, the tree man said. Me and my brother, we're not too little together. She pulled Neely forward. The man looked at them, a thin girl of 10 with starveling hollows in her cheeks, but with the chin still baby round. He looked at the little boy with his fair hair and round blue eyes, Neely Nolan, all innocence and trust. "Two ain't fair," yelped Punky. "Shut your lousy trap," said the man who held all the power in that hour. "These kids here's got nerve. Stand back, the rest of yous. Those kids is gonna have a show at this tree." The other kids made a wavering lane. Francie and Neely stood at one end of it, and the big man with the big tree at the other end of it. It was a human funnel with Francie and her brother at the small end. The man flexed his arms to throw the great tree, and he noticed how tiny the children at the other end of the funnel looked. For the split part of the moment, the tree thrower went through a kind of Gethsemane. "Oh, Jesus Christ," his soul agonized. "Why don't I just give him the tree, say Merry Christmas, and let him go? What's the tree to me? I can't sell it no more this year, and it won't keep till next year." The kids watched him solemnly as he stood there in his moment of thought. "But then," he rationalized, "if I did that, all the others would expect to get 'em handed to 'em. And next year, nobody at all would buy a tree off of me. They'd all wait to get 'em handed to 'em on a silver plate. I ain't a big enough man to give this tree away for nothing. No, I ain't big enough. I ain't big enough to do a thing like that. I gotta think of myself and my own kids." He finally came to his conclusion. "Oh, what the heck? Them two kids has got to live in this world. They got to get used to it. They got to learn to give and take punishment. And by Jesus, it ain't give, but take all the time in this god-darn world." As he threw the tree with all his strength, his heart wailed out, "It's a god-darn rotten, lousy world!" Francie saw the tree leave his hands. There was a split bit of being when time and space had no meaning. The whole world stood still as something dark and monstrous came through the air. The tree came towards her, blotting out all memory of her ever having lived. There was nothing but pungent darkness and something that grew and grew as it rushed at her. She staggered as the tree hit them. Neely went down to his knees, but she pulled him up fiercely before he could go down. There was a mighty swishing sound as the tree settled. Let's hear a mighty swishing sound. Everything was dark, green, and prickly. Then she felt a sharp pain in the side of her head where the trunk of the tree had hit her, and she felt Neely trembling. When some of the older boys pulled the tree away, they found Francie and her brother standing upright, hand in hand. Blood was coming from scratches on Neely's face. He looked more like a baby than ever, with his bewildered eyes and the fairness of his skin. Had they not, but they were smiling. Had they not won the biggest tree in the neighborhood? Some of the boys hollered, "Hooray!" A few adults clapped. The tree man eulogized them by screaming, "And now get the heck out of here with your tree, you lousy kids!" Although he used some worse words than that. Francie had heard swearing since she had heard words. Profanity had no meaning as such among her people. They were emotional expressions of people with small vocabularies. The phrases could mean many things according to the expression and tone used in saying them. So now when Francie heard themselves called names, she smiled tremulously at the kind man. She knew that he was really saying, "Goodbye. God bless you." The end.